The bank manager's face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. His fingers shook as he reached for the phone, eyes never leaving mine, as if I'd just slid a live grenade across his desk instead of a worn leather passbook. "Lock the front doors," he said quietly to his assistant. Then, after a pause, louder, "and call the police. Now." He looked at me the way people look at something dangerous they don't fully understand. This passbook had belonged to my grandfather. The same passbook my mother had thrown into the trash the day before, sneering as she did it. "Worthless junk," she'd said. "Old accounts that don't exist anymore. Should have stayed buried with him." She was very confident it meant nothing. She was wrong. Some secrets don't stay buried. And some of them have teeth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Elena Wright. I'm 31 years old, and until that morning, I thought the most dramatic thing in my life would be arguing with my landlord over a broken radiator that screamed like a dying animal every time the temperature dropped below freezing. I worked as a paralegal at a small law firm in Columbus, Ohio. Nothing glamorous. Modest pay. Long hours. A 12-year-old car that made a sound like a wounded whale whenever I turned left. But I was good at my job. Because I noticed things. I asked questions. And I didn't let go until I found answers. My family had always treated that like a flaw. The funeral was on a Tuesday. My grandfather, Henry Wright, had died at 89, on his farm 2 hours outside the city. A quiet place with a wraparound porch and open fields that stretched so far they made you feel small in the best way. Everyone assumed he'd had nothing. Just an old man in an old house, living out his final years in simple obscurity. That assumption was carefully curated, mostly by my mother. The service itself was small, efficient, and emotionally sterile. Exactly how my mother liked things. She believed emotions were weaknesses. Funerals included. She ran the event like a corporate meeting. 30 minutes for the ceremony. 45 for the reception. No lingering. No unnecessary tears. The food was aggressively mediocre. My grandmother, who had been dead for years, would have come back just to complain about the potato salad. She had standards. My mother did not. My brother Caleb arrived late, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He blamed parking, despite the fact that the farmhouse had a gravel lot the size of a football field. He didn't look sad. Then again, Caleb had never been good at emotions unless they benefited him. He hugged our mother, shook hands, and spent most of the reception staring at his phone, probably watching his investments rise and fall. I stood in the corner and watched my family perform grief like bad actors in a play they didn't care about. And I thought about my grandfather. Henry Wright had been an accountant for 40 years. Numbers were his language. He could look at a spreadsheet and see stories hiding between the rows. He was also a chess player. A very good one. He taught me when I was 7, sitting on the porch with a board between us, glasses of lemonade sweating in the summer heat. He used to say chess wasn't about the pieces you captured. It's about the positions you create, he told me. The traps you set. The patience to wait for your opponent to make a mistake. His favorite saying was this: "The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie." I didn't understand it then. I do now. 2 weeks before he died, I visited him. His body was failing, but his eyes were sharp, clear in a way that made you feel seen. He grabbed my hand with surprising strength and pulled me close. "The passbook," he whispered. "In my study. Inside the chessbook." He paused, catching his breath. "Only you, Elena. Promise me." I didn't understand. After the funeral, the family gathered at the farmhouse. My mother was already talking about selling the property, calculating square footage like the body wasn't even cold yet. Caleb nodded along. They had clearly discussed this before. I slipped away to the study. The room smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco. My grandfather hadn't smoked in decades, but the scent never left. I found the chess book immediately. Strategic Endgames. It felt too heavy. I opened it, and my heart stopped. The pages had been hollowed out. Inside was an old leather passbook. I carried it into the living room, curious, wanting to share the discovery. That was my mistake. My mother saw it before I could speak. She crossed the room in 3 fast steps, snatched it from my hands, and threw it straight into the kitchen trash. "This is garbage," she snapped. "Old accounts that don't exist anymore. Don't go digging through his things." Caleb laughed. "Always sentimental, aren't you?" They exchanged a look. Brief. Sharp. Afraid. I'd seen that look before. Working in law teaches you how secrets move between people. That night, I couldn't sleep. If the passbook was worthless, why was she angry? At 5 in the morning, I drove back to the farmhouse. I dug through the trash like a raccoon in business casual. I found the passbook. And tucked inside it, a note. Written in my grandfather's careful hand. "They don't know about this account. Trust no one in the family. Only you." That was the moment everything changed. By the time the sun came up, I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to confront my mother. I wasn't going to ask my brother questions he would lie through anyway. And I wasn't going to talk myself out of this by pretending I was overreacting. That instinct to minimize, to doubt myself, had been trained into me my entire life. Henry had trusted me for a reason, and I wasn't about to fail him now. I showered, dressed, and packed my bag like I was going to court instead of a bank. Passbook. My ID. A copy of my grandfather's death certificate. Proof of relation. Working at a law firm teaches you one thing very clearly. If you don't come prepared, you don't come at all. The drive took 2 hours. I kept the radio off. Silence felt more honest. My grandfather had been many things: patient, meticulous, strategic. He didn't hide things out of paranoia. He hid them because someone had already proven they couldn't be trusted. And my mother's reaction hadn't been the anger of a woman inconvenienced. It had been fear. That thought stayed with me the entire drive. The bank sat in a small town called Millbrook, 1 traffic light, 1 diner, the kind of place where people waved at strangers because they assumed they knew you from somewhere. The building itself was old brick, dignified in a way that modern glass banks never managed to be. A place that had seen secrets pass quietly through its doors for decades. I walked in at 9:15 a.m. The teller was young, polite, and cheerful in the way people are before their day turns strange. She took the passbook from me, turning it over in her hands with mild curiosity. "I've never seen one like this," she said. "Neither have I almost replied. She typed the account number into her computer. Her smile faded. She frowned. She tried again. Then she excused herself and disappeared into the back. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. I sat in the lobby and tried not to convince myself this was all nothing, that I'd driven 2 hours for an empty account and an embarrassing story. The security guard struck up a conversation. His name was Carl. He was training for a 5K. His wife had banned bread from the house. I nodded and smiled and absorbed none of it. Then a man in an expensive suit appeared. Grey at the temples. Tall. Professionally neutral in a way that suggested years of bad news delivery. "I'm Richard Hale, regional manager," he said. "Would you come with me, please?" Something in his voice made my stomach drop. His office smelled like leather and old paperwork. He took the passbook from me carefully, like it might bite. He studied it for a long moment. Then he sat down heavily and exhaled. "Ms. Wright," he said, choosing each word with care, "this account is flagged." That word landed hard. Flagged never means anything good. Not because of anything you've done, he continued quickly, but because of its history. He explained that the account wasn't from the 1960s, despite the vintage cover. It had been opened in 2010. Deliberately disguised. Untouched for 14 years. Then he wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. $2,147,832. I made a sound, half gasp, half laugh, half desperate need to sit down. My grandfather. The man everyone thought had nothing. The man who wore the same sweaters for decades. Had hidden over $2 million. But Richard Hale didn't look relieved. He looked worried. There's more, he said. In 2015, someone had attempted to access the account using power of attorney documents. The signatures hadn't matched. The system flagged inconsistencies. The transfer was denied. The attempt was logged. I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. Who? He glanced at the file. Margaret Wright. My mother. My hands went cold. More people arrived. Security. Legal. They pulled records, old ones, buried ones. What emerged felt like watching a puzzle assemble itself in slow motion. My grandfather had inherited money in the 1990s. He invested it carefully. By 2009, when my father died and my mother became his caretaker, he had accumulated over $1 million. And then, my mother found it. Over 5 years, she drained it. Transfers. Withdrawals. Forged documents. Approximately $1.5 million gone. Henry noticed. But she had already convinced doctors and courts that he was mentally incompetent. No one believed him. So he did what accountants do best. He documented. He hid what he could. He waited. This account wasn't just savings. It was evidence. Richard looked at me quietly. You just brought us what your grandfather couldn't, he said. That was when he reached for the phone and told his assistant to lock the doors. The police arrived within 2 hours. Financial crimes. Elder abuse. The detective, Serena Blake, had sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. These cases always look the same, she said. Family. Power. Silence. She examined the passbook with something close to respect. Your grandfather fought back the only way he could. I nodded. I finally understood what Henry had meant all those years ago. The truth doesn't rush. It waits. That night, my phone rang. My mother. Her voice was sweet. Concerned. Fake. Just checking on you, she said. You didn't take anything from the farmhouse, did you? I lied. Then my brother called. Too friendly. Too careful. Just let it go, he said. It's not worth the fight. That was when I knew. They were scared. And fear only comes when something buried is about to surface. 3 days after I walked out of the bank, my phone rang at 8:12 in the morning. I remember the time because I was standing in my kitchen, staring at my coffee like it had personally offended me. The voice on the other end was old but steady. My name is Arthur Langford, he said. I was Henry Wright's attorney. And his friend. He asked me to call you when this began. When? Not if. That single word told me my grandfather had been planning this for a long time. He left instructions, Langford continued. Very specific ones. If anything happened to him, I was to contact you. Only you. I was in my car 15 minutes later. Langford's office sat above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and sugar, which felt almost cruel given what waited upstairs. The office itself was small. Old-fashioned. Real books on the shelves. Framed diplomas from decades ago. Langford was tall, stooped slightly with age, but his handshake was firm. Henry was the most methodical man I ever knew, he said as he led me in. When he came to me 4 years ago, I believed him immediately. He placed a thick folder on the desk between us. He spent years building this. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was my grandfather's quiet war. There were copies of power of attorney documents, my mother's version and Henry's original signatures side by side. The differences were subtle. Too subtle for someone who didn't know what to look for. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The pressure was wrong. The loops too perfect. The rhythm artificial. She traced his signature, Langford said calmly. Well enough to fool most people. Not well enough to fool a bank. Or an accountant. Next came bank statements. Pages and pages of them. Withdrawals Henry hadn't authorized. Transfers he hadn't agreed to. Amounts logged in his own handwriting, dates carefully recorded. He had annotated everything. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every time my mother had smiled while stealing from him. And at the bottom of the folder, a sealed, notarized affidavit dated 2 years before his death. Langford slid it toward me gently. Read it when you're ready. I opened it. I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I am doing. My daughter-in-law has taken control of my finances under false pretenses. She has convinced doctors and courts that I am incompetent when I am not. I am leaving this record because I know no one believes an old man accused by his own family. I am not confused. I am being robbed. I couldn't breathe. Henry had known. Not suspected. Known. Langford watched me carefully. He told me something once, he said. He said, the hardest thing about being old isn't the pain. It's being ignored. I broke then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears sliding down my face as years of loneliness I hadn't lived pressed against me like a weight. The detective called the next day. Ms. Wright, Serena Blake said, we followed the money. And that was when my brother entered the story properly. Not as a bystander. As an accomplice. Caleb hadn't just benefited from the stolen money. He had helped hide it. A shell company. Registered under his middle name. Hundreds of thousands of dollars laundered through clean-looking paperwork. The house. The car. The lifestyle. All built on my grandfather's silence. I'm sorry, Serena said. But she didn't sound surprised. Then came the final piece. My mother had done this before. 20 years earlier. To her own mother. Money vanished. Suspicions raised. No proof. Pattern established. Henry had seen it. And he had prepared. He knew he wouldn't win while he was alive, Langford said later. So he planned to win afterward. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by documents and quiet. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Family is everything. Don't forget that. I stared at it for a long time. Family. That word had been used to silence me my entire life. It wouldn't work anymore. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, nothing had changed. I answered my mother's calls. I listened to her complain about neighbors and grocery prices. I nodded while my brother talked about new opportunities. I smiled. I ate dinner at her table. I said of course and that makes sense and you're probably right. Inside, I was documenting everything. Dates. Times. Exact wording. Detective Serena Blake had been very clear. Don't warn them. Don't confront them. Let them believe they're safe. That was the hardest part. Sitting across from people who had robbed my grandfather blind and listening to them talk about family values without choking. Sunday dinner was torture. My mother's cooking had always been an act of aggression against food, but that night it felt symbolic. Dry chicken. Overcooked vegetables. A meal built on bad decisions. She talked about selling the farmhouse. I've already found a buyer, she said lightly. Good price. Quick closing. My brother nodded. I'll handle the paperwork. They had already divided everything. They just hadn't told me. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside. Her voice softened. Her eyes practiced concern. We don't always agree, she said. But your grandfather would want us to stick together. I met her gaze. Of course, I said. Family first. 2 lies in 1 sentence. The call came on a Thursday morning. Serena's voice was calm, controlled. We're executing the warrants today, she said. Arrests will be simultaneous. I thought you'd want to know. I thanked her. Then I sat on my couch and waited. My mother answered her door in a bathrobe, coffee in hand. She saw the badges first, then the uniforms. For a split second, her mask cracked. Just enough for fear to slip through. Serena read the charges clearly. Fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, theft. My mother tried one last performance. This is a misunderstanding, she said. Henry wasn't well. I was protecting him. Serena didn't blink. We have bank records, forged documents, a notarized statement, and evidence of an attempted theft you didn't know existed. That was the moment my mother understood. Not that she was being accused, that she had lost. The handcuffs closed quietly. No screaming. No collapse. Just the slow death of a lie she'd lived inside for 15 years. Across town, at the exact same moment, my brother was in a conference room. Clients. Coffee. PowerPoint slides. The officers walked in. He went pale, tried to speak. Tried to mention his lawyer. They weren't interested. He was cuffed in front of people who had believed he was successful. His reputation died before he reached the elevator. The case moved fast. The evidence was overwhelming. My mother's lawyer tried to argue Henry was mentally incompetent. The prosecution brought in 3 doctors. All testified the same thing. He was sharp, aware, consistent. The incompetency ruling had been based on lies my mother told. The judge wasn't sympathetic. My brother's lawyer tried something else. He came to me privately. He's willing to cooperate, he said. He says he was manipulated. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. In chess, I said, you don't negotiate with pawns. It didn't matter anyway. The shell company destroyed any claim of innocence. The sentencing happened in February. Cold courtroom. Wood-paneled walls. American flag behind the judge. The prosecutor read Henry's statement aloud. No one believed me. But I am not confused. I know exactly what is being done to me. My mother stared straight ahead. Her hands shook. My brother wouldn't look at me. The judge spoke. 7 years. 3 years. Restitution. Everything seized. Everything returned. I didn't feel victory. I felt something quieter. Completion. Afterward, Serena found me in the hallway. Your grandfather would be proud, she said. I nodded. Outside, the air was cold and clean. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The letter was waiting in Langford's office. Not legal. Not dramatic. Just my grandfather's handwriting, careful and steady. I chose you because you listen. Because you see people as they are, not as they pretend to be. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to survive me. If you're reading this, then I was right. That was all. No instructions. No guilt. Just trust. For the first time, I understood. He hadn't left me money. He had left me responsibility. The farmhouse was sold quietly. The money went where it was meant to go. I cut contact with my mother and brother, no speeches, no closure talks. Just distance. Peace didn't arrive loudly. It came in small moments. Morning coffee without dread. Sleep without replaying the past. Silence that felt safe. Some legacies are inheritances. Others are freedom. And this one? He left just for me.